This is just a little experiment we've been doing for this is our second one. We're really rapt to have you. Thank you so much for doing it.
Excuse me. Yeah, thanks, Rob. Rob's going to get all the words in. You just watch. He's a bit of a chatterbox.
I'll try and keep it brief. I'll leave it up to Chris and Jackie to ask me anything and cut me off when appropriate.
No, you just tell your juicy stories, mate. That's what we love about you.
Okay, we're live now, everybody. I mean, that's not a reason to stop talking all of a sudden.
No, we should certainly keep talking. That's what we're here for.
Fame anybody? That's
Absolutely
the name of the game.
No, I'll keep it very brief.
We've got a few people just rolling in now. We've got
If I mention a name or an industry, I've already mentioned a Royal Commission. It's already on record.
Speaking of Royal Commissions, Richard Beasley SC retweeted the post today.
Now, what's everybody drinking? I've got a little tipple of sherry here. What have you got, Rob? Have you got a drink?
I've actually I'm drinking water, but it's actually a ball water. I'm trying to be good. Look how it's not really clear. That's the drinking water we have out here at the moment. Because yeah, we've got a bit of rain, but it isn't Scotch, Jane, and it isn't red wine for a change. So I thought I'd be
we'll keep our heads on straight
so
for the start.
Sociable for a while. So
what's in your? What are you drinking, Jack?
I've got a Moscow Mule this evening, which I was able to whip up with the ingredients that were in my fridge. Thanks very much to my generous housemates.
All right, it's 5:30. We better make a start. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Nature Happy Hour, the second instalment of Cocktails, Controversy and Conservation. I'm Chris Gambian, the Chief Executive of the Nature Conservation Council of New South Wales. There's an old saying that if you sit on the banks of a river long enough, you will see the bodies of your enemies float by. And I consulted my most trusted news and information sources today, Google, and it wasn't entirely clear if it was Sun Tzu who said that, or Confucius, or the Perth rock band called the Drones. But at any rate, it wasn't Barnaby Joyce, because to Barnaby, a river is just something to give away to your irrigator mates. And it's the only thing floating on it is a carpet of blue-green algae. Jakey Mufford, you're known for your dry wit. How do you feel about dry riverbeds?
Look, I don't know about the dry wit, Chris, but I do know what it's like to rely on the environment for water, because unlike you, city kid, I'm from the country and grew up relying on rainwater.
Now, Jackie, water comes out of taps. What are you talking about? This is craziness.
Exactly, you would say that.
Now, before we meet our guests, hit us with those ground rules for this august event.
Yeah, I can do. For those of you who weren't at our last event, I'll let you know how it's going to run. So Chris and I are the hosts, and we're being joined by our wonderful panelists. So they'll each speak, and we'll ask them some questions when they're done. So type your questions into the chat or into the Q&A box.
If the questions are good, like really good, we may read them out.
But honestly, you can just sit there and listen. It's 30 minutes and we've got great speakers.
If you need a drink, get up and get one. We're recording this talk so you can watch it later on Facebook. And remember, you can follow the chat on Twitter using the hashtag Nature's Happy Hour. And please, if you do that, follow me at Chris Gambian, because frankly, I need more friends on Twitter.
And all importantly, if you're enjoying yourself tonight, go to nature.org.au and send us some money. Because as we know, koalas grow on trees, money does not.
Jackie, now the first time I met Rob McBride, it took 3 hours and 2 bottles of red for him to introduce himself. Rob, we have nothing like that amount of time tonight. But Rob is a farmer at Tolarno Station. Your family's been at Tolarno for how many generations?
About 3 generations now. So, but we've been farming in Australia for about 170 years.
And he's so Rob's been a leading voice to protect the Darling River. Welcome tonight, Rob.
Thanks, Chris.
You're right today, Chris. Just like to pay my respects to the Baaka Nation, and especially the elders past, present and future. This is the Baaka country and the Baaka people's country, so more than happy to speak about the river, but respect them.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Rob.
That Derek from the Baaka Native Title Corporation is due to join us, but we haven't managed to get him on the line yet. So as you can see from Rob's feed, the internet connections are not entirely awesome for that part of the world.
Thanks, Chris. Our second speaker this evening is Jane MacAllister, who is a councillor on Wentworth Shire Council and has been a long-time activist for conservation along the river. She's now the NCC community organiser on our water campaign, which means that I get to work with her. Welcome, Jane.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Chris. Hi, Rob. And I'd also like to acknowledge that I'm on Pooncarie land as well, in this far southwest corner of New South Wales. Yes, we do have some issues out here with our technology, so it may well be that Derek's been called away or he's unable to attend due to that. Hopefully he'll be able to get some sort of coverage, but yes, it does get sketchy out here, to say the best.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Jane. Look, this is a question to you both. For a lot of the people watching tonight, we're in Sydney. There'll be people from right across New South Wales. I was lucky enough to come and meet you both out there just before Christmas and get to experience that landscape, which I hadn't experienced before. But can we just start by, can you just tell us what's it like from your perspective to be in that part of the state? And really, along the river, what is the nub of the problem?
Go, Rob. I know you've got theories about this.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed, Chris, and thank you very much for having us. Look, the worst corruption in Australian history is taking place in the outback on the Darling Baaka today. Unfortunately, we're a long way from Sydney, and I thank you for kind of bringing the message to Sydney. Australians have got to understand they've spent about $8 billion already, given it to people who have just dug bigger holes and taken the water and taken the money. And we need to get transparency back into the river system, because at the moment there's no transparency and the river system's dying, and it's as simple as that. And we need to have a Royal Commission.
Great, thanks, Rob.
John?
Sorry, I think you just addressed that to me. Chris, as we said to you when you came out here, we are just so grateful that people are interested in our little neck of the woods. It's really been at tipping point, and when you came out here and saw it just before Christmas, it was probably at its worst. Just after you left, I think we actually had a day of 51 degrees and it was nasty out there. You know, Rob deals with that all the time, me less so. I'm a little closer to the towns, but basically what's happening is there's not enough inflows. We've heard that there's been a 50% decrease in the amount of water that's allowed to get past Burke. So there's a whole section of 1,400 kilometres of river that is just drying up. The New South Wales Government has made extreme events policy around critical water, but there's no action around it. So basically they've just come up with a way of recording how bad the end of the river is as it's dying. And it literally has been dying, and we're still waiting for the results to come in on whether some species will recover. Now that we have connection once again with the Murray River, we need to keep it that way. So we can't just say, great, it's rained, great, the rivers are connected, let's go back to business as usual. We need to make changes.
I just want to jump in there, just on that point of the volume of water that's coming down the river. Just for those people that haven't experienced a regulated waterway like the Darling River, can you just explain a little bit about those mechanisms? Like how is it controlled? How is the water regulated?
Yeah, so it's actually unregulated, our part of the river, and that means it doesn't have locks and weirs on it like the Murray River does. So essentially the Murray River is an irrigation series of pools which are manually connected when water's needed to get through for water orders or for environmental watering or to get water to South Australia as it's required. The Darling River operates differently. There's a bunch of tributaries right at the top in the Northern Basin. Water needs to get, first of all, across the border from Queensland and then through those tributaries to feed in through Burke. There's a lot of cotton up in that corner of the world. I'll let Rob talk more about that. And then past Burke, there's really only a couple of weirs. The water moves, it's lots of floodplain up in the north as well. And then the water moves very quickly through to the Menindee Lakes, which looks a bit like a string of pearls and is the chief native fish habitat, nursery and recruitment for the entire Murray-Darling Basin. Fish from there have been found upstream in the Darling and also up and downstream in the Murray, Murrumbidgee and other rivers as well. So it's less regulated. Once the water gets to Menindee, then it's regulated again and is allowed, if there's enough there, to come down the Darling River. And that's where we're at the moment, trying to decide how much water should be allowed through the Darling River and still allow us to have 12 to 15 months of drought reserve if we don't get any more rain in the Northern Basin.
Great.
Thanks, Jane. One question that's coming up a little bit, I've seen a couple of times in the chat and the Q&A from our audience, is would buying back more water for the environment help?
Absolutely. Look, one of the things that we've been talking about, sorry, Rob, I'll just quickly and then I'll throw to you. There are A-class licences in the northern part of the Darling River that really need to be bought back. And I know that there have been some willing sellers wanting to sell back these licences as well. The Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder needs those licences because at the moment they have a lot of less or lower reliability, lower security licences, which really don't cut it. They need the higher security licence because then they can get environmental water through. So that would be one really good action. And Rob's got something else to say on that.
Yeah, go Rob.
Very much that we've experienced for the first time in our country's history, a flood was stolen. Quite simply put, the river system, and Jane touched on the Menindee Lakes, 4 times bigger than Sydney Harbour, and that was stolen. Melinda Pavey saying lots of water's getting through the Menindee Lakes. To give your listeners some idea, the Menindee Lakes are ephemeral, but they effectively 4 times the size of Sydney, and water's released over a period of time, up to say 6 or 7 years after they flooded. So they were a natural gauge of the whole Murray-Darling Basin. 80% of the golden perch come from the Menindee Lakes. Slight modifications were made to them in the 1940s by the South Australian Government, not the New South Wales, to regulate the waters coming down. But it is the very heartland. And for your listeners, too many Australians only know about the Murray River system. 40% of the natural flows that came down through the river system of Australia in the Murray-Darling Basin came down through the Darling. So we've got a situation where greed and corruption has effectively stolen. So to answer the question, buybacks, yes, but let's also catch the criminals. There are a number of large cases pending, but at the moment, you probably can steal about $4 million worth of water, get hit over the knuckles and get a $10,000 fine. And that's what we're facing. Until we work out transparency in the system, why would you buy back licenses when people are stealing so much water that we might not need that many buybacks? Yes, have buybacks, but since the 1970s, Australia's had satellite imagery. The Murray-Darling Basin authorities had DataCube for the last 5 years. So we've had satellite footage of all the illegal operations going on this river system, and you've got the government's turning a blind eye to everything. So yes, we need buybacks, but we need the criminals killing the river system. Quite simply, illegal earthworks, if they're proven, take the land off the people, take the water licenses off the people, and release the water back into the system. And we're talking some pretty large cases, and I don't want to particularly mention cases, but there's one further up the catchment where potentially a gentleman will be going to jail for probably 7 to 10 years. It's that serious. The magnitude of these thefts are horrific, and it's taking years to even get to the court systems, and we really wonder why. Four Corners was a number of years ago allegedly showing the corruption happening within the system, and it appears ICAC, the New South Wales Government and the National Party are turning a blind eye, and the time's over for that. Yes, we need buybacks, But most importantly, we need to know transparency and we need to know honesty within the system.
Just on the
just one more thing, if I may. Those people who have been caught stealing water or charged and found guilty should forfeit their licences, in my opinion, because if you can't be trusted with water, you should not be allowed to have it. We've had meters for so long in South Australia and Victoria that they're aged now, they need to be replaced. There's still, what, 75%? I don't even want to throw a number out there, but I will, because this is about controversy, Chris. And I'm going to say 75% of meters in the Northern Basin are not, pumps in the Northern Basin are not metered. In Queensland, it's even worse. And of those, half of them aren't working.
Yeah,
and
those dumb city kids like me who are listening, talk us through the mechanics there. So you've got a pump that pumps water out of the river into your block. What is the meter?
Let's just break it down.
Two ways. Mechanics. Effectively, you've got down. You've got your Murray, you've got your Darling, and you've got your tributaries. So effectively, what's happened is people have either cut the tributaries off and put the water on their land, and therefore there's no pumps on that. You just put natural barriers to stop the water actually getting down the tributaries, and it's yours. And also the floodplains. Floodplain harvesting. There's nothing harvesting about floodplain. It's raping a river system. So effectively what you do, you laser level the catchment of the Darling Baaka river system. You destroy all the vegetation off it. You level it. And then you put a huge barrier between it, that is the floodplain, and the river. You take all that water. And at the moment, the New South Wales government don't really know how much water you've taken. They're talking about putting sticks in the ground to calculate the amount of water that is taken. I mean, seriously, in this world today, there are more criminals in the Northern Basin of this river system than ever was around Al Capone. It is unbelievable. And the National Party really have some major questions and answers. I genuinely believe that party will no longer be in existence once we get the Royal Commission. And remember, you've got to understand, the National Party is holding the Liberal Party over a barrel, both state and New South Wales and federally, to keep them in power. The water has gone to the National Party, which I kind of liken it to the National Cotton Party, because it hasn't helped farmers out in any way. It's allowed the total destruction of a river system, and everybody turns a blind eye, and it's just total. Ladies and gentlemen, it is the worst criminal activity our country's ever seen. And you're destroying not only this generation's future, but for generations to come. And I think Bruce Shillingworth, an Aboriginal elder, put it to us, we are borrowing the land and water from our grandchildren. And at this juncture in time, the Darling Baaka has never looked worse. I had to watch 100 million fish die, and we are talking in the vicinity of 100 million fish. Currently, there's a trickle coming down the river. So all the floodplains down here, which normally get floods, are not getting any water at all. And you've got to remember something so simple as yabbies. They dig themselves in for 7 years maximum, then they come up, and you're talking about billions of yabbies, billions, not millions. They are going to die. You are going to kill billions of yabbies on top of the millions of, hundreds of millions, 100 million odd fish. This is a catastrophe like nature has never put on this continent, and it is a disgrace to the Barkinji nation, who have administered and looked after this country for 60,000 years, and they don't even have a voice. And that is an absolute disaster, because I've been lucky enough to spend a lot of time with Barkinji elders throughout the system, and they know their country, and our people are now, we're selling out everything for a short-term profit on a totally unsustainable product, which us river systems can't cope with.
Getting a lot of supportive comments there in the chat, Rob, and a lot of concern from we've got 250 people watching now, and a lot of concern about what you're talking about. And one question that's coming up a fair bit is, what can people be doing to see accountability for this, and what kind of pressure can we be putting on our politicians to see action taken?
So there's been incremental changes made to the legislation, the policies, procedures and river management and we need to claw that back. And at the moment, we've seen that the New South Wales government isn't even using current drought and the millennium drought in their data. So there is a campaign that the NCC is running at the moment to email Minister Pavey and Minister Keane, so that before they put the water sharing plans in, they make sure that they're using up-to-date data. There are also other things that you can do. You can get in touch with your local MP and you can ask them, what are you doing about the health of our inland rivers? Talk to people, talk to everybody about it. Make sure that people understand water is life. It should not be a commodity. It should not be sent overseas as a fibre so that we can import it back as a 30-cent t-shirt. It also should not be sold to international companies. This is Australia's most precious resource. This is the driest continent on the planet. There's only a finite amount of water on the planet. We must take better care of it and we must look after it. But first of all, we need healthy rivers. So get in touch with the NCC, get on the website, become a voice for nature, and we will keep you informed. There's lots of things that you can do. And those of you who RSVP'd today, I believe we're going to be sending out more information on what you can do as this campaign amps up.
Great, thanks, Jane. Now, Rob, you've touched on it a couple of times, some of the sort of grubby tactics that you've experienced, particularly in the Northern Basin and various segments around there. You got a story to tell us?
I've had more death threats than I've had hot dinners in the last 10 years. I'll tell you one that was quite funny. I was on radio one time. This is around a bit north of us, and talking for about 45 minutes, and I thought relatively went okay. So went off. I rang up the station manager a week later, and he said, "You're still alive." And I said, "Yes." Very particular reason why I wouldn't be. And he said, "Funny thing is, the two largest cotton growers in Australia came down to our station and said, we're going to get McBride." So they sat down for the next 45 minutes and played the audio back. And the owner of the station at the time said, "On what basis are you going to get McBride?" And apparently they just stood up and walked away. I believe they bought the radio station. Another time, this is on the public record, so it's nothing too untoward, but I was at MIMCO, which is the Water Ministers' meeting, and I'm talking to the former Water Minister, and he wasn't Water Minister at the time. I walked up to him. He said, "We're not watching anything you're doing, Rob." And I said, "That's very good." And he said, "We're watching everything. You put a fucking foot wrong and we're going to get you." And I said, I won't mention names. I said, "Niall, if you want to watch me chase some sheep around the paddock, it's your prerogative. Have a nice life." The good thing is this is on public record. So when the South Australian Royal Commission spoke, we provided all this information, so he can no longer come back and say this is hearsay. It was put on the public record. He had the ability to reply to it. To the speakers, Jackie said, how can people make a change? It's getting to know what's going on. This is the Channel 9 and Channel 7 categorically refuse to do anything on this issue. We know executives within these organisations are large water holders or have been very large water holders. So therefore there's skeletons in closets, and we must get the skeletons out. And the only way we can do that is by Australians spending a bit of time learning about what's going on, talking to us, going to sites like yours, going to sites like Tolarno. Last month at Tolarno, we reached 1.2 million people in Australia. They watched just under 990,000 videos. So Australians are wanting to know what's going on. Yeah. The problem is the mainstream press is deliberately keeping it a dead story, and that's a catastrophe, because this is the worst war. You didn't have to ever go offshore to fight in the First or Second World War. We did that for whatever reasons. This is a war at home. This is the worst war we've had in our country's history. And you might think should be in a loony bin, and you're probably right. But the fact is, about 40 metres from my front door is a river system that I have watched collapse totally. I have had to watch 100 million fish die. I've had to watch the ecosystem die. I've had to watch millions of trees die, and there's a trickle going down the river, and we're supposed to be happy that the cotton industry let a trickle come down the river system. Ladies and gentlemen, your futures, your children, your food security is collapsing, because by water not getting to the Menindee lakes and not coming down the Darling Baaka, therefore South Australia gets to call and Victoria gets to call water coming down into those states out of the Murray. The Murray continually getting smashed. The price of water is going through the roof. So those people who produce your crops can no longer do so, or your dairy industry. You know, at the end of the day, you know, you can't eat cotton. It's only a $1.5 billion industry. To give you some indication, our wool industry is still about $7 billion. So it's minuscule.
Seem to have lost.
But it's got total control of our river systems. And I liken it to power, and it's going to kill the whole Murray-Darling unless we show Australians for what it is through a Royal Commission.
Yeah.
Sorry if I'm being very frank, but I've got many other cases. When I've been travelling, I was going to a different meeting. I get phone calls saying, we know you're on that road, watch out for the road trains. I've had many, and far too many threats against my life. I was at a meeting a couple of months ago, and I was a participant watching and sitting down in the audience, and I walked off and just and I had somebody come up to me, put their business card in my face and say, unless you stop everything you're doing, we're going to destroy you, your family and your business. Now, as I said, I took it to the police because we had 3 people's records. At this stage, it's in the too hard basket, because I guess we're looking at other means of exposing exactly what's going on, and maybe the legal cases are another avenue. Jackie, to have your listeners understand what the government has done both in state and federal water law is, in my little humble view, criminal. They've destroyed any equity or integrity within the rivers by giving it all to a certain select few. That needs to be exposed, and therefore we're looking, like others, at a legal system as a legal challenge against government departments that clearly have destroyed the integrity of a river system for everybody. Everybody's losing, and people in Sydney have to understand your food supply is collapsing. Your kids' future on this continent is collapsing, because we used to feed 40 million people out of the Murray-Darling Basin. At the rate it's going, we won't be feeding you, and we can't feed anybody else, and it's getting that serious. And people are suiciding, people are giving up. Big corporate almond plantations are coming in. It's just madness, because with almonds, they've exploded tens of thousands of acres on the river system. Each almond is about 5 litres of water. So unless you're going to live your life in Australia eating almonds and cotton waste, there's not much future for us unless we make a quantum leap back into reality. And by doing so, effectively, we must have a Royal Commission. We must. And when we do, watch the rats disappear out of the system. You watch the changes. You watch them turn on each other. Sorry.
Well, you mentioned cotton. Cotton's come up a few times, and one question we have from Judy, who's watching, is what percentage of the stolen water do you think goes to cotton, as opposed to other agricultural uses like almonds or things you've mentioned?
At the moment, 80% of water taken out of the Darling Baaka river system comes out for cotton. What proportion is stolen? I don't know, because the problem is the calculations haven't been there. Because under floodplain harvesting laws, you can just pretty much take what you want, and nobody's policed it. As Jane mentioned, you had meters on your water tank pumps. They were just turned off and decommissioned, and nobody checked them out. There were investigators, and they were taken off the board. They were told by the New South Wales government not to investigate. So we don't know exact numbers, but we do know the river system's collapsing, because I've had 56 years experience of living on this river, and I've never seen it sicker than it has in the last 4 years. I've had to live 2.5 years without a river system. The Barkinji people in Pooncarie, which is one of their bases, I think life expectancy is 42 for females and 38 for males. The land and the river is everything to the Barkinji. I mean, it's in their name. It's the Barkinji Nation. And I hope before I die that this returns to what this river should be called, which is the Baaka. It shouldn't be the Darling Baaka. Governor Darling never actually got out here. It was Captain Charles Sturt gave the name of a suckhole event to try and get a promotion out of Sydney. But that's why we have the Darling River here. Darling never, particularly not a great governor, he never came here. And this should be the Baaka River. So before I die, I genuinely hope that this returns to the name it was called for 60,000 years.
Absolutely.
And I hope that
Darling Harbour and Darling Street, we probably won't forget Governor Darling, so we could probably afford to change the name of the river back to what it...
I think the best Darling is on Blackadder, though.
Agreed.
Much for that. Jackie, have we got one more question?
One question, so something that's come up a couple of times this evening is, the need for a Royal Commission. Another question we've had is what can we do to make that happen, to bring that forward?
Jane?
Make noise, just keep making noise, get in touch with people, join a group, join the Nature Conservation Council of New South Wales. If you're in Victoria, if you're in South Australia, join your Conservation Council. This affects you too. If the water doesn't come down the Darling, it puts, as Rob said, more pressure on the Murray to provide water to South Australia. If water is in the Menindee lakes over 640 gigalitres, 50% of that is Victoria's water. It's also South Australia's water. So this is not just about South Australia. This impacts the entire Murray-Darling Basin, and everybody should get angry. Chris asked about meters before. At home, when you drink water out of a tap, that water's metered. You pay for that. It's exactly the same in irrigation. We know that every drop of water is precious and we expect to pay for it. And the fact that there are bastards up there that just have not put meters on their pumps and, or they have and they pretend they're not working is criminal. It's a crime and something needs to be done about it urgently. Get angry, make some noise, people.
Great, thanks so much. Now, before we go, we're right on 6 o'clock, but I don't know if you caught up with this news, but last week Alan Jones announced that he's retiring from politics. Well, that's a Freudian slip, isn't it? He's retiring from radio at the end of the month. So in honour of his contribution to broadcasting, we've designed this week's game. It's called Jones, So Long, and thanks for all the chaff. Are you guys ready to play?
Yeah, bring it on.
Okay, so I'm going to read 3 quotes. And you have to tell me if they are authentically the parrot or they are a pretender. Are you ready to go? First one to jump in wins. Quote number 1. Human beings produce 0.001% of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere.
Oh my God, really?
True.
Parrot.
You'd have to say that to be a true statement from Alan Jones.
Quote number 2. Put her in the same chaff bag as Julia Gillard and throw them both out to sea.
Oh, that was a Jones quote. That's one of his best, worst, most famous.
Quote number 3. Chris Gambian from the Nature Conservation Council is doing some excellent work over there and on very important issues too.
Yeah, that's chaff.
Undoubtedly, he didn't get his time. That was on next week's show. So I understand that now.
I think that's what Rob said when you were down there after 3 bottles of wine, wasn't it?
But Alan Jones did give me a shout out on his show last year. He called me a liar 2 days in a row. So, I feel like I got to at least have a little brush with broadcasting history. Well, thank you for joining us tonight, and thanks to everybody who's on the line. We've got about 250 people who joined us on the Zoom call, and I know many more hundreds on the Facebook. So thanks very much. Jackie, what do we need to know? What's next?
Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Thanks, Jane. As I mentioned earlier, if you're not already a voice for nature, head along to nature.org.au and make a donation to keep us going. And I believe in 2 weeks' time, we're going to be talking all things green bans.
Lost Jack Mundy last week, and it's actually, we already had planned it, but Meredith Bergman, who literally wrote the book on green bans and one of Jack's good friends, former president of the New South Wales Legislative Council, is going to join us on Cocktails, Controversy and Conservation. Make sure you tune in for that. Thanks very much, everybody. Good night.
Thanks all.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you very much for having us.